Hey everybody, welcome to our free Wednesday night webinar sharing our iTunes U course, Literacy in Action. I'm Kristen Zemke coming to you tonight from New York, and I'm joined by my amazing colleagues. Guys, introduce yourself and say hello.
Hey,
Hi.
Chris, go ahead, Jeanne.
Oh,
Sorry.
I'll go first then,
Go
Don.
first.
Ladies first. All right, so my name is Jeanne Halderson, and I am a seventh grade teacher from La Crosse, Wisconsin. And what I'm really excited about is keeping kids active and engaged in learning while using research-based reading and literacy strategies.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeanne. I'm Don Goble, and I'm in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm a multimedia instructor and going to talk about the number one skill not consistently taught across schools all over the world, and that's media literacy. And not only consuming professional media, but having students create their own and following the media literacy cycle through student voice and student creation.
We're so excited to be with you tonight because what we believe is that thinking and learning should be fun, that as educators we need this ongoing development and support to build our understanding and our pedagogy of what matters for kiddos. And so a number of months ago, Don, Jeanne, and I collaborated with our other colleague who's not able to be here tonight, Christy Musey, to create this iTunes U course as a tool to use with students as well as with teachers to really peel back the layers of technology and education and look at how we can use creative tools to build student thinking. So we're going to unpack that a little bit for you tonight. Hopefully this is something you can learn from as well as share with your staff in the future. So Don, you want to keep it going?
Definitely. So I'll go ahead and we're going to load up our some images that we would like to talk about.
Hey, while you're loading up those images, do you mind if I talk a little bit about iTunes U?
Go, Jeanne.
Our course is actually housed on iTunes U, which is totally free. It's free for you to access, and it's free for us to use. And the really awesome thing about iTunes U is that you can create, edit, and manage your course right there in one place. So what that means is whether you're teaching or providing professional development, anything that you create, PDFs, video, audio, digital books, all of that can be stored in one place that's really nice. It's all organized. For me as a seventh grade teacher, I love that because seventh graders lose everything, but it's really just a nice place for everything to go. The other nice thing about iTunes U is that you do not need an internet connection to access our course. And so as long as you've downloaded everything when you do have an internet connection, you can hop on in the car, you can hop on in a plane, and you can get staff development anywhere. So as we're going through our course and you're exploring it on your own, I challenge you to take a look at iTunes U and see if it's something that you could possibly use in your classroom.
Way to sum it up, Jeanne. So if you're looking to download this course and use it as a resource continuing beyond tonight, we have the link available for you in just a second. It's called Literacy in Action, Create to Learn, and you can download it here. And Don, if you click ahead to the next slide, you'll see that this is available on the iTunes U. You can insert the link or scan this QR quick response code to access the course, and from here you can then download it to your device. So like Jeanne said, it can live on your iPad or your iPhone, and it's a tool that you can go back to over time. In addition to our course, there's a number of amazing courses on iTunes U from great educators who we're privileged to call colleagues around the world. And so if this is something that resonates, if you're like, oh, I love this, Flash PD model where I can access something on demand, go ahead and check out the other courses by Apple Distinguished Educators on iTunes U. So what we're going to do next is we're going to unpack some of the elements and share a little bit with you about what this course has to offer your students.
We're going to jump right into my portion of the course, which is really heavy with a multi-touch book interviewing an expert. So as I mentioned in the intro, what I wanted to do was to allow students an opportunity to create their own media. And then not only create their own media, but as a class analyze it, but then also publish that media, which is so simple to do with an iOS device or whatever camera you have in the web connection. And so then be able to allow a global audience, an authentic audience, to critically analyze the work of your students. I also wanted to keep this very simple, and where this really helped in working with Kristen and Jeanne, since I work at the high school level, I work with 9 through 12, and I work with a lot of students from all different grade levels. They really helped me pair this to a point where any student really at any grade, under the customization of their teacher, could really make this work for any subject, and that was kind of the idea. So when I say interview an expert, we really talk about an expert being anybody in the field who knows anything about a specific topic that you're covering in class, and the book will talk about that. We get you kick-started by preparing for the unit and all the different word processing, video production apps that you might use. Now, we use iMovie, which works tremendously for us. We can record within the app. And then the workflow, which the websites that we use are SchoolTube, and we use Google Drive for iOS to do some collaborative work. But then we really kind of get into the nuts and bolts of learning how to conduct an interview, which is, I think, a skill that I think is really important for any child at any age, really breaking down the barriers and allowing and teaching the kids some capacity for communication skills, which will include research and planning and contacting maybe somebody they don't know and preparing questions, thoughtful questions that will be related to your subject. And so we talk about characters and what the interview is looking like. We'll talk about conducting the interview, and not only all the different methods of conducting an interview. There's a number of different ones, from doing a virtual connection with an expert, maybe via Skype or Google Hangout or FaceTime, or maybe we're talking about someone right there in your own community. But before we actually go out and provide that interview an expert, we'll take you through some sample lessons and some practice in your own classroom to really allow your kids some those little mini lessons to prepare them for the culminating assignment. And then we kind of talk about, which I think is really important, you know, anybody that has a device now that has the video camera capability is capturing video anywhere they are in their community. And many times I see it's taken out and you're holding it vertically, or you're too far away from your subject and it's really bad quality of audio. And so I take you through some very easy, for the beginner, ways to capture quality audio and video. We'll show you some exemplars and take you through the whole process then of the culminating project, where you actually identify an expert. You might use social media. You might leverage the friends and relatives and the community members that you have, and really talk to them. Maybe you talk to a gardener about gardening, because you're going to plant a garden in your 4th grade school. Or maybe you talk to a scientist about what it's like, you know, if you're going to create a lab, a chemistry lab. It really doesn't matter. It's totally up to you. With the final steps being to publish that video so that as many people in the world can see it. Now, we also take into effect, you know, the privacy issues of teaching some younger kids, or kids that might not want their work out publicly. So we talk about Google Drive and KidBlog, and then we talk about some other safer websites to host the video. SchoolTube.com, which is a free website for teachers and students, and then of course Vimeo and YouTube, which are the popular public websites that are out there to host video. And we take you through the steps of how to register and how to upload. And then what I think is maybe one of the most important pieces of all of this is discussing and reflecting as a class about the peers' work, your personal work, doing some self-reflection, and that can take the form of a blog. It can take the form of just taking out pages and creating some notes and sharing that with your teacher. Maybe you have Google Classroom. Again, it doesn't really matter the format or the technology. It's really the process of talking about it as a class collaboratively, and we also give you some questions and possible responses to practice with the kids before you get to the culminating assignment. And so really my hope is to take people through a lesson that is really simple to get to. Let me just jump back here for a minute. That's really simple to take through start to finish, something you could do in a class period or two, something if you wanted to take the research and go through for a week or more, but just something that would be relatable to any age, any subject, but it engaged the students in a way of using the iPad or an iPhone to actually practice some interviewing skills while gaining some really important research and content skills as well.
You know, Don, I really enjoyed reading your book, and I have to say that before I read your book, I was a little intimidated about doing interviews, but one of my favorite things about your book is that you broke everything down into chunks that really make it manageable for anyone to understand what it is that you're doing. From the simplest thing of anyone can be an expert, I mean, like my dad makes cakes and he can be an expert, to something more elaborate like the person who takes your blood at a blood drive. And so some of the simple things that you shared about, they seem simple to you, but they are more difficult for people that haven't been trained on that. And so I use your examples with my class, and I show the pictures of the kids with the lighting and with how you hold the iPad. And so I think your book is something that any teacher at any age level could use because it's broken down into such simple language. So I loved it.
I appreciate you saying that. And yeah, that was kind of the goal as well. So, maybe there's a student who's played the violin for 8 years, but she's 12. Well, she's an expert student violinist, and we can learn some things about what it's been like to practice all those years and learn about music and reading music. So I'm glad to hear you say that, and you helped with that, because that was really our goal, was to chunk the book in sections to make it really simple, maybe to show what not to do, and then to practice and actually perform what we would like you to do.
Absolutely.
And I think the beauty of this course is the recursive format from course to course, right? What we do is take you through a selection of lessons from high school down through the junior high years, down to elementary school, and what you're going to see is a little bit of information about the author, about who is working on and curating this course, and then it's going to go through a series of process where it's going to give you a little bit of the research, tell you how to implement it in your classroom, show you some video of lessons in action, and then talk through, here's some snapshots of student work samples. And so I think that piece from high school down, from start to finish, following that same format, crafts a continuum, whether you're a beginning technology user or someone who's a little bit more advanced at the practice. Teachers can find an entry point that works for them. So lots of awesome things to share here.
Awesome. If we're ready to move on, Jeanne, you're going to be up next.
All right.
So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen once again and bring up the information that you would like to talk about.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to talk about a class book that my students made, and when we made this class book, what we were really addressing was the lack of background knowledge that my students come to me with. And so, as we know, with reading, you have to have background knowledge before you can understand and comprehend and even remember what it is that you're reading. And so I like to use videos to build background knowledge because, they're multimodal. You can hear them, you can see them, and you can really get into the emotions of what's going on in a video. Thus, the problem is, and I think as teachers we've all been there before, you pop a 60-minute video in and you show it to the class and you get all done with it and you realize, wow, the kids aren't quite as excited about the video as you are. And so in addition to that, the video might have taken 60 minutes. And so I address that by having kids watch just short clips of the video. So instead of watching the full 60-minute video, we break the video down into short clips that kids can manage, and then the kids become an expert on their clip and share it out with the rest of the class in a class book. So as you go through my part of the course, I have also broken mine up into chunks that are easy to manage and understandable. One back there, Don. Moving back.
Sorry.
All right, thank you. All right, so to begin with, you have to have some teacher prep. So you have to find your videos. And so I list several places that you can go for free videos. Perhaps your district has Safari Montage or Discovery Streaming. Those are nice because everything's broken down for you. In the case of my video, I actually picked a 60-minute video that was free on the internet from PBS Frontline, and I broke it down into short segments that the kids could understand. So after the kids each received their part of the video that they were going to watch, they watched their video. And the first time that they watched it, they were really just exploring it, and they were asking questions like, what do I already know about this topic? What surprised me? What do I want to know more about? The second time that they watched the video, they started taking notes. And I give kids a choice. They can either take notes on Poplet if they're a more visual learner, or if they're more linear like I am, they might use Pages to take their notes. So they kept track of the main ideas and the supporting details, and then they started to write the actual text of their chapter of the book. And so then we move on to the next slide, Don, and we move into, back one, we move to the next step, which is actually creating the book. And we use Book Creator, which is one of my favorite apps. And the kids put their text in first, and then I teach them how to find photos that have a Creative Commons license, and not only how to find them, but how to cite those photos. The last step is for kids to practice reading their text. We know that fluency is important at all levels, and so this is just one way that we can kind of trick kids into practicing their fluency by having them read their own work and then recording it inside of their book. I've also provided a formative or summative. I used the rubric as a formative evaluation, and we looked at the content. Do they have the correct content? Are they displaying their information about their video correctly? We also looked at the writing part, the spelling, the grammar, the punctuation, the illustrations. Are they actually Creative Commons illustrations? Are they linked back to the original source? Do they cite them correctly? And the last thing that we looked at was the collaborative piece. How did the kids do when they collaborated on their book? Because you got to realize that partners are working together, and then we are combining this book so that 30 kids are working together on one large book. The last step is to share our book, and we share our book with the class, of course, on iTunes U, because it's simple. We just pop it out there and all the kids can quickly download it. And we had a celebration day. During that celebration, we had a back channel where we discussed on today's meet how each child's or each group's chapter related to the other chapters in the book, and all of a sudden we realized that a theme was starting to emerge. Chapter 1 related to Chapter 8, Chapter 7 related to Chapter 12, and then finally we took our project one step further and we published it on the iTunes store, so it's available for free. If you want to download it, it's called The Secret State, and the author is the Cooley Kids. And so you can get an idea of what our kids were working on. So basically what I'm trying to say is that videos used correctly can be powerful tools to build background knowledge and interest, and you can pretty much do it with any topic and any grade level.
I think one of the things I love about your project, Jeanne, is that it's something that is accessible to students of all ages, right? Like your idea of taking the teacher home with you and capturing fluency recordings is so powerful that I think like all teachers, that's a practice that I've adopted after working and collaborating with you. And so I think if we think about, you know, what are some of these small practices? Not everything has to be an end of the unit project that's like a big thing, but what are those habits for living on a weekly basis that we embrace with our kiddos and scale to change thinking and learning? That's what we need to do, and that's really what I love about some of your practices with taking the teacher home.
Well said.
Awesome. All right, so next I'm going to talk a little bit about what we can do in the elementary grades and think a little bit about how do we draw, capture, and record to scale student thinking. And I think, you know, some of the pieces that are so simple, the best tool that we have accessible to learners on a iOS device is the camera. And so what are the 99 ways we can use the camera for students to capture student thinking? And so one of the practices that I love is this idea of a reflection booth, kind of what we're doing tonight with this webinar, this video confessional, think Real Housewives of Anywhere, but with kids talking about their reading or talking about their science or social studies learning. And so my section of the book talks about some of these simple practices. It has infographics that are intended to support teachers as well as students in this thinking process. So how can we go through this aspect of, turning the camera on, toggling over to video, capturing student thinking as a way for kids to reflect, as a way for kids to document their process over time. It has a number of infographics that you can print out intended to be used with kiddos at a center or at a station. And so there are a number of these pieces that are ideally guidance tools for teachers to learn how to do the strategy, but then also pieces that you can show kids. If you flip to the next slide, Don, my favorite piece of this course, or this section of the course, is the idea of scaling the idea of mentor text, right? We know mentor text works in reading, writing, and math workshop. Now we need to embrace mentor tech as a tool for students. And so throughout the course, there are video tutorials created by 6, 7, and 8-year-olds, again, to guide an educator through the steps of capturing some of these pieces of thinking, but also intended to be shared with students, where a teacher can take a short video clip, plug it into a projector, and say, watch this example of how to create an iMovie. Watch this example of how to do a reflection video. And so teachers and students can build understanding together. If you move on to the next section, you'll see an entire set of student exemplars. How do these practices impact thinking and learning on a day-to-day basis? And so from the complex of students creating iMovie trailers to the simple aspect of a child holding up what they worked on today and talking about a piece of paper, here are some of the ways you can create, capture, and share with your students. And so hopefully this gives teachers a number of ideas to get started, really drawn from the idea of practices you can use tomorrow with kiddos. It doesn't take a lot of setup, it doesn't take a lot of time, but these are powerful ways of building students as thinkers. My exemplars talk about first through third grade. If you flip to the next slide, our colleague Christy Musey has really focused in on what happens in kindergarten. If you're familiar with Katie Wood-Ray or Matt Glover's work, you'll hear notes of that throughout, as she really talks about best practice in writing pedagogy. How can we get kids to fluently produce text over time? And how does what we know from the elements of volume and choice impact our 5- and 6-year-old learners? So everything from setting visions to what we want to see as writers, to, if you can flip to the next slide, using some of these creative tools to really build thinking. Tools like a blogging tool, like a learning management system, like something as simple as notes can be embraced by our younger learners as an additional modality to capture student thinking. And I think really that's the power of this course in general, that it gives kids a lot of entry points to learning, and thus students can find a mode that works for them to share their thinking.
Kristen, whenever I see your work, I'm always amazed by what you do and the fact that I know that I can up-level that for my 7th grade classroom. And I have to be honest, if I was reflecting, before I met you, I probably didn't always listen to 2nd and 3rd grade teachers and what they were doing because I wasn't sure it was relevant. But after hearing what you do with kids, can you imagine doing a confessional in 7th grade? I don't know, maybe we should call it a reflection station, but that intrigues me.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you provide the infographics, and I know that I can use those infographics if I have kids that need additional help. And so I think just the fact that what you're talking about is documenting work over time. When I look at a 7th grader, a lot of people think that, okay, 7th graders, they don't change as much as little kids, but a 7th grader at the beginning of the year is really a 6th grader, and a 7th grader at the end of the year is really an 8th grader, and it's amazing the amount of progress that they make. And if we're able to document that over time, just like you do, I think that we provide a valuable reflection tool for our students that they can look at and say, wow, I really grew this year. So I appreciate your work.
Totally, and I think as a whole, what we're talking about, right, is creating to learn and capturing student thinking. And I think that's one of the big benefits about mobile devices is that kids have concrete snapshots of what they did last week, last month, 6 months ago, and this piece of reflection is so guiding in what they want to investigate next, as well as what we teach them next, what content we put in front of them. And so it really becomes a kaleidoscopic piece of how many entry points do we have to thinking, and how do we guide students to build their own knowledge, right?
Absolutely.
The other thing I love about it too, Kristen, and I stole your idea at a workshop that I did on that video confessional. I had everyone take out their device and talk themselves, but then also turn to a partner. What's one thing that you've learned so far this week? And really, never before have we had a tool that allowed a student or an adult to share their thinking and capture it and record it, other than if they had a portable recorder, if you wrote it down, or if you had a big digital camera and you were able to do it. But nobody wanted to take the time to do that, and that's the simplicity of this. And I see it with kids, so many different kids, that they may not be able to express themselves in the way that the written word needs to be yet. But that doesn't mean they aren't learning lessons, and in fact, in some cases, having some really deep thought that they are then able to communicate with us as the teacher and their classmates. And it's a really powerful thing, because what does that lead to? Confidence. If I can't get my thoughts down on paper, then maybe I don't have the right thoughts, and maybe I'm not smart enough. But when we allow students this entry point into recording their voice and their thoughts, that gives them confidence. They do know the subject material, and now maybe we just need to work a little bit differently on writing or organizing our thoughts in a way that's still required. But to me, I've just seen confidence go through the roof and motivation for kids when they're able to do these different types of tasks that you're talking about at an elementary level. And I've up-leveled that to high school and adults.
And I think it's that carrot on the stick model, right? Like, we know where they need to be. It's about benchmarking it into steps that can help them get there. So as a whole, really looking at how can we take creative tools as a mode for capturing student thinking. How can we get kids to read more, to write more, to think more, and what does that look like across the grades? Hopefully we can find ways to build those practices in and use them for all learners. Our course is called Literacy in Action, Create to Learn, and there are a number of other amazing courses available on iTunes U. So we hope that this is a model that you can use for yourself as a learner, but also a tool to share with learners in your building, whether they be adults or children. Final thoughts?
Absolutely. I hope everybody checks it out. I hope they kind of take a look and maybe customize it to their own liking, or follow it exactly, and take a look at all the other great content that you mentioned, and use it. Just try it. If it's just take one of the ideas that we've offered tonight, or one of the ideas that you see in the different sections of the course, I think that's a success. To just try one thing a quarter, a couple things a semester, 4 or 5 things a year, and really try to improve not only your personal skills as an educator, but really try and find ways to gain some more motivation and engagement with your kids.
All right. We appreciate you all joining us tonight.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great week, and we will learn with you anytime. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Goodbye.